I'm sorry, Ethan. It's Julian who truly loves me. So, I can't marry you. Seraphina's face was resolute as she took off our wedding ring and threw it to the floor. She turned and ran to Julian's side, taking his hand. I was stunned, barely able to believe what I was hearing. Seraphina, what are you saying? Seraphina answered with a chilling calmness. I said, Julian is the one who truly loves me. You only love the polished, successful version of me. He's the only one who's seen me at my lowest, in my darkest moments, and never left my side. He's the one who truly loves me. That's why I can't marry you. I want to live. Looking at Seraphina's determined face, a cold realization washed over me. She truly believed that Julian was the one who loved her most. And I was nothing but a fool. Seraphina and I had been together for 8 years. 8 years in which I had assumed, without question, that she was my life partner. I had proposed countless times. Each time, she'd refused, using the excuse that she wasn't ready. This time, she'd finally accepted, but it was because she had cancer. 3 months ago, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I immediately arranged for the best specialists to treat her. They recommended surgery, but she refused. She told me she was bound to a blessed motherhood system. She claimed that if she had a child with the man who loved her most, she would be completely cured after completing the mission. At first, I thought she was lying, desperate. I still urged her to have the surgery. But she pleaded, Ethan, would I joke about my own life? Just believe me this once, please. She refused to cooperate with treatment, leaving me helpless. I reasoned that no one would gamble with their own life, so I half believed her. It was then that she finally accepted my proposal. I still remember her beaming smile as she took my arm. I know Ethan is the one who loves me most. Only you can save me. So, I'm willing to marry you and have your child. Now, it was clear that everything she said was a lie. I looked at Seraphina, her fingers intertwined with Julian's, a knot of bitterness forming in my throat. Seraphina, are you really leaving with him? Have you forgotten our 8 years? This was the woman I had loved for 8 years. I had given her my heart and soul. I had never wronged her. Seraphina looked at me, a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But before she could answer, Julian pulled her closer. Julian gave me a provocative look. 8 years? So what? I'm Seraphina's first love, the one who loves her most. Do you understand our passionate, whirlwind youth? Only first love is true love. Everything else is settling. You only wanted to marry Seraphina because of her potential, her career. I'm different. I witnessed Seraphina at her most helpless and vulnerable, and I never left her side. That's true love. Julian's impassioned speech seemed to strengthen Seraphina's resolve. Seraphina nodded, agreeing with Julian. Ethan, I know you've been good to me, but our relationship was more of a business transaction. I need Julian. He's the one who truly loves me, the one who can save me. I stared at Seraphina's familiar face, a long silence stretching between us. Finally, I took a deep breath. All right, I respect your decision. I watched as Julian led Seraphina away from the wedding venue. Their retreating figures seemed to radiate a sense of escape and joy. The wedding was canceled. I maintained my composure, making sure the guests were taken care of before returning to our home. When Seraphina and I first met, she was still in university. I had been invited back to my alma mater as a distinguished alumnus to give a speech. After the speech, Seraphina approached me, asking to intern at my company. She added me to her contacts. Back then, Seraphina was a young woman with a stubborn glint in her eyes, full of pride. She was beautiful and resilient, like a radiant sun, and I was naturally drawn to her. It was only after we started dating that I learned she was an orphan. My heart ached for her hardships. I supported her through university and then sent her abroad for graduate studies. She was incredibly driven, always at the top of her class. When she returned, she expressed her desire to start her own business. I supported her wholeheartedly, providing her with seed funding and introducing her to industry leaders at business events. 8 years passed. We had been through so much, and she had achieved her dream, building a successful business. I thought our 8 years of mutual support were born out of genuine love. But in her eyes, it was just a business transaction. I smiled bitterly to myself, remembering how easily she had discarded the ring, how resolute she had been in fleeing the wedding. My heart ached with a dull pain. Looking around the empty room, I felt suffocated. I knew my reluctance to let go was normal. Those 8 years had been precious to me. But as someone who had been immersed in the business world for years, I also knew that sunk costs should not influence major decisions. So, since Seraphina no longer wanted this relationship, there was no point in dwelling on it. The next day, I composed myself and went to the office as usual. But I found Seraphina and Julian waiting outside my office. I frowned. "What are you doing here? This is not a place for you. Get out." Julian looked down at me with disdain. "What are you so proud of? A spoiled rich kid who relies on his family. If it weren't for Seraphina, your family's company would probably be bankrupt by now. I won't waste my breath on you. Just return the money you embezzled from Seraphina. I need it for my son in Seraphina's belly." I froze. What? Seraphina was pregnant? When? I looked sharply at Seraphina, my heart pounding with a suffocating pain. "Seraphina, whose is it?" "Mine, of course." Before Seraphina could speak, Julian answered. "I'm the one who loves Seraphina the most. Of course, she'd only have my child." "See, Ethan, your family may be rich and powerful, but you're still no match for me. The woman you love most is carrying my child." I sneered, ignoring Julian, and looked at Seraphina. "So, just one day after we separated, you're pregnant with someone else's child?" But Seraphina's eyes were calm. "Ethan, you know I have cancer. Only by having a child with the man who loves me most can I survive." So, while she was still with me, she slept with Julian. "Ethan, you can understand, right?" Seraphina said it as if it were a matter of course. "Since we've separated, some things need to be settled. Julian is right. The money I worked so hard for should go to our child. Ethan, you don't need the money anyway. Just give me Pearl." Pearl was the jewelry company Seraphina and I had founded together. We each owned half the shares. She wanted to take my half to raise her and Julian's child? The audacity! While I didn't need the money, I wasn't about to be taken for a fool. I scoffed. "I don't need the money, but I won't give it to animals." "What did you say?" Julian roared, enraged by my words. I ignored Julian and looked at Seraphina. "What's yours, I won't touch. What's not yours, don't even think about it. I'll have a lawyer contact you about the division of Pearl. And don't come looking for me again. Just the sight of you disgusts me." Seraphina stared at me in disbelief. "Ethan, how could you become so heartless? We were together for 8 years, and you say I disgust you? And you want to fight me for Pearl? Don't you care about our past at all?" "Our past?" She actually dared to mention our 8 years together. 8 years of love, and she betrayed me by sleeping with Julian before we even separated. And she had the nerve to talk about our past? "Seraphina, you dare to talk to me about our past? For 8 years, I poured my heart and soul into helping you achieve your dreams, and you repaid me by cheating on me with this animal. And you expect me to care about our past? Don't even dream about it. I won't give you my shares of Pearl." I turned and walked towards my office, but Julian's voice followed me. "Ethan, fine, keep the shares. But you slept with Seraphina. For 8 years. You should at least pay some compensation. Even if you hire someone for special services, you have to pay." I stopped, turned to look at Seraphina, and sneered. "This is the man who loves you most, comparing you to someone who provides special services." Seraphina was momentarily stunned, embarrassed. Her face darkened as she grabbed Julian and started arguing with him. I ignored them and walked into my office. To prevent them from harassing me further, I quickly hired a lawyer to handle the division of Pearl. After the company was split, I hired the jewelry designers I had personally recruited when I founded the company to work for my family's business. My parents had passed away, leaving me with enough wealth to live lavishly for the rest of my life. But I had my own dreams. I didn't want to just live off their inheritance. Before, my dream was to stand at the top of the jewelry world with Seraphina. I wanted a partner to walk alongside me. I once thought I had achieved that, that I had realized my dream. But it was all just a dream, a joke. On the day of the property division, Julian and Seraphina sat across from me, their fingers intertwined. Seraphina's eyes were filled with a complex mix of emotions. Ethan, even though I wronged you, Julian is the one who loves me most. You should understand. I mocked myself inwardly. In my 8 years with Seraphina, I had done everything I could to love her, to nurture her into the independent woman she had become. I had been so proud of her. The woman I loved most was the flower I had cultivated. Her blossoming was my badge of honor. But now she was telling me that the man who loved her most was a lowlife who had dragged her through the mud, ruining her reputation. Seraphina, I have nothing to say to you. I just hope you don't regret it. I'm truly sorry, Ethan. I'm grateful to you, but I know very clearly that you're not the one who loves me most. Seraphina's tone was so firm, so resolute, that for a moment, I wondered if I had done something wrong, something that made her feel unloved. But that wasn't true. I had given her my heart and soul. My conscience was clear. I suppressed my emotions and sneered. All right, I respect your decision, but as I said, I won't give you my shares of Pearl. Seraphina was defiant. I've made my decision, and I won't regret it. You can keep the shares. I can still make Pearl a success on my own. Ethan, you might not know this, but everyone out there says I'm just a pretty face, a trophy wife you're keeping, that I only achieved what I have because of you. I refuse to accept that. I have beauty and talent. Everything I've achieved, I earned through my own hard work. It has nothing to do with anyone else. So, leaving you is actually a liberation for me. Only with Julian can I prove myself. I don't want to live in your shadow anymore. I was stunned, finding it hard to believe. So, sending her abroad, giving her the best resources, paving the way for her return, helping her achieve her dreams, in her eyes, it was all a shadow? I looked at her, her eyes filled with resentment, and felt a deep sense of sadness. After the property division was finalized, I heard that Seraphina had kept the name Pearl and handed over the management of the company to Julian. I heard that she was pregnant and that Julian wouldn't allow her to work, wanting her to be a full-time housewife. I found it ridiculous. I had gone to great lengths to cultivate Seraphina, sending her abroad, supporting her business ventures, only for her to willingly become a housewife. It was absurd. I immediately instructed my company to cease all support for Pearl, withdraw all funds and personnel, and terminate all collaborations. Pearl, in Julian's hands, would only decline. After all, I didn't believe someone who hadn't even finished high school had the ability to manage a company. Thinking about this, I suddenly remembered Julian's words at the wedding. He said he had witnessed Seraphina at her most helpless and vulnerable and had never left her side. He was the one who loved her most. But as far as I knew, Seraphina's helplessness and vulnerability back then were caused by him. Seraphina had once told me about her first love. She said she met Julian in high school. Although she was an orphan, she received financial aid, allowing her to continue her studies. She was a top student, while Julian was a local thug who collected protection money. Seraphina was beautiful, but because she was an orphan, she was introverted and often bullied. Julian was one of the bullies. At first, he just wanted to collect protection money from Seraphina, but her beautiful face attracted him. He pursued her relentlessly. After they got together, Julian persuaded Seraphina to have sex with him and even convinced her to film intimate videos. Later, the videos were somehow leaked, and everyone in the school knew about them. Seraphina became a target of scorn. The insults, humiliation, and stares made her life unbearable. From then on, she suffered even more severe bullying. Her benefactor also stopped supporting her. If it weren't for her good grades, she would probably have been expelled. And during that time, when Seraphina was at her lowest, Julian was there for her. It wasn't until she went to university that she broke up with Julian. Back then, she told me that she hated Julian, that she could never forgive him for leaking the videos, and that she never wanted to see him again. But now, she claimed to hate him, yet she was secretly pregnant with his child. Out of sight, out of mind. How ridiculous. Since she believed Julian was the one who loved her most, Let's see what happens to her cancer after she has a child with the man she claims loves her most. I was waiting for that day. I saw Julian and Seraphina again 3 months later at a business event. Julian stood beside Seraphina, who was visibly pregnant, his face absent-minded. Seraphina was carefully smiling and toasting several executives. I was surprised, but somehow it was also expected. Julian initially forbade Seraphina from going out to work and socialize while pregnant, wanting to take control of Pearl. But he lacked the ability to run the company. In just 3 months, Pearl had lost several important contracts and suffered significant losses. If things continued this way, Pearl would likely go bankrupt. So, out of desperation, Seraphina had to take over Pearl again, despite being pregnant. Our eyes met accidentally. Julian's expression brightened, and he pulled Seraphina towards me. Seeing me, Seraphina's hand, holding a glass, trembled slightly. Her eyes glazed over, and she froze. She seemed to have become much more haggard. "Isn't this Mr. Lancaster? It's been a while. I really have to thank you for letting Seraphina go. Otherwise, how could I have such a successful career and a pregnant wife?" I sneered. "Don't mention it. I'm always generous to beggars." Julian's face changed. "Ethan, do you really think you're something special? Let me tell you, one day I'll crush you under my feet. You only got where you are because of Seraphina. Now Seraphina is mine, and she's carrying my child. Don't even think about taking her back." Taking her back? I had no interest in garbage. I ignored Julian and looked at Seraphina's belly, offering a humanitarian greeting. Pregnant women shouldn't drink alcohol. Even though the parents were animals, the child was innocent. Seraphina quickly shook her head, chuckling nervously. "It's okay. This isn't alcohol." I nodded perfunctorily and turned to leave, but Seraphina called out to me. She hesitated. "Ethan, did you say something to those executives? Their attitude towards me is very different now. Is it because of you? Even though we didn't get married and I wronged you, we still had 8 years together. Even if you're angry, you shouldn't secretly tell them not to cooperate with Pearl, should you? And the business world is about fair competition. You can't." "Ms. Ainsworth, are you overestimating yourself?" I interrupted Seraphina, my voice filled with disdain. "Ms. Ainsworth, do you think you're someone so important that I would go out of my way to retaliate against you, to sabotage you? And, whether it's these executives or Pearl's regular business partners, they're all friends of Lancaster Corporation, friends of Ethan Lancaster. What do they have to do with you? You say their attitude is bad? Heh, Ms. Ainsworth, do you think you have some earth-shattering talent that deserves their smiles and compliments? Since Ms. Ainsworth mentioned fair competition, then you should know that there are plenty of companies more outstanding than Pearl." Seraphina's face was flushed, her head lowered as she mumbled, "But even for the sake of our past 8 years, couldn't you ask them to help me a little?" "Help you? Why should they?" Julian pulled Seraphina's hand, shielding her behind him, and roared at me. "Ethan, who are you looking down on? What's so great about you? You're just relying on your family's connections. If I had your background, I'd be 10,000 times better than you. You're deliberately sabotaging us, deliberately retaliating against me. You're jealous that Seraphina chose me, is pregnant with my child, and abandoned you. Ha 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 ha. So what if you're jealous? Let me tell you, without Seraphina, you'll be bankrupt soon, a useless second-generation rich kid. Enough, Julian, stop it." Seraphina's face was grim, and she anxiously tugged at Julian. She knew my temper. If Julian really angered me, Pearl would be finished in this circle. "Ethan, I'm sorry, Julian didn't mean it that way. Please forgive him." Seraphina pulled Julian's hand, wanting to leave. If they stayed any longer, Seraphina would probably feel utterly humiliated. After all, I wasn't the one who would suffer from this confrontation. "Seraphina, you're apologizing to him? Do you think I was wrong?" Julian stubbornly held onto Seraphina's arm, refusing to leave. Seraphina's eyes showed her impatience. "Enough, Julian. You don't understand anything. Stop it." "Seraphina, you're yelling at me for Ethan? What do you mean?" Julian's face turned menacing, and he tightened his grip on Seraphina's wrist, questioning her. Do you look down on me too, thinking I'm not as good as him? I'm the one who loves you most, and you're embarrassing me for another man? Tell me, are you still thinking about Ethan? Are you planning to cheat on me? Julian yelled at Seraphina, his face contorted with rage, completely disregarding her pregnancy and tugging at her roughly, even though she was wearing high heels. Tell me, do you look down on me too? You dare to look down on me? Ah! A sharp scream pierced the air. Seraphina had been pushed to the ground by Julian. I approached and saw that Seraphina was in excruciating pain, her forehead covered in cold sweat. Her face was filled with panic, and she sobbed, begging for help. Ethan, help me. My stomach hurts so much. Help me. Julian stood there, looking impatient. Can't even walk properly in high heels? I didn't look any further. I turned and called for an ambulance. I did nothing else. After all, I wasn't the child's father. The incident at the banquet hall became the talk of the industry, and I, too, caught snippets of the rumors. They said the baby was almost lost. After that day, Seraphina became incredibly protective of the child, refusing to go out and socialize with Julian. She stayed home, focusing on her pregnancy. After all, if she didn't give birth to the child of the man who loved her most, she would die. But with Seraphina staying home, Julian was completely overwhelmed by the demands of running Pearl. He was in a constant state of panic, and the company lost several million-dollar contracts. They argued frequently and fiercely, but Seraphina remained firm, refusing to return to the social circuit. However, after Julian was humiliated at a banquet and assaulted a business partner, resulting in the loss of another major contract, he finally snapped. He forcibly dragged Seraphina out of the house, drugged her, and took her to a hospital for an abortion. When Seraphina woke up, she was inconsolable, weeping hysterically. But Julian, the man who claimed to love her most, was utterly impatient. The baby's gone. So what? There's still time. The company is on the brink of collapse. Your priority should be figuring out how to make money for me. Now that the baby's gone, I'll see what excuse you use to neglect the company. When my secretary relayed the story, she sighed. Boss, she had someone like you who loved her so much, but she chose a heartless thug. What was she thinking? What was she thinking? True love? I couldn't understand it, but it no longer concerned me. However, Julian's words reminded me of something. I remembered Seraphina saying that the so-called system gave her a time limit of 3 years to have a child. I wondered if she would be able to fulfill that requirement. My secretary, seemingly with nothing better to do, always kept me updated on Julian and Seraphina's situation. I didn't mind listening. After all, I wasn't so magnanimous as to wish my betraying ex a happy life. I didn't know how Julian convinced Seraphina to return to work and socialize, but I occasionally saw her at various events. We never spoke. She seemed to be deliberately avoiding me, but I had no desire to see her either. We were strangers now. My secretary said that she and Julian had reached an agreement. She had to get pregnant, but she wouldn't neglect her work while pregnant. Seraphina indeed kept her word. Pearl, which was on the verge of bankruptcy under Julian's management, was surprisingly revived by Seraphina, and Seraphina became pregnant again. I once saw her from afar, toasting executives with a large belly, her expression humble and ingratiating. Seeing Seraphina like that, I felt a strange sense of disorientation. The Seraphina I knew was proud and radiant. It was always others who toasted her, who sought her out. She never had to beg anyone. Even in the past, when she went out to negotiate business deals, no one dared to make things difficult for her, out of respect for me. This current situation was entirely of her own making. While I felt a pang of regret, I also knew that I no longer had any feelings for her. 8 years meant nothing, it seemed. Over 2 years passed. The next time I heard news of Seraphina, she was pregnant with her 3rd child, and it was almost time for her to give birth. I was surprised. Was her illness still not cured? Had the mission not been completed? Why else would she have 3 children in a row? I was puzzled. During those 2 years, thanks to Seraphina's efforts, Pearl, although not bankrupt, had shrunk considerably. Its annual revenue was 10 times less than before. But despite the reduced profits, it had managed to survive. And during those 2 years, I hadn't paid much attention to them because I had a new life. My former competitor and I had buried the hatchet and decided to join forces, expanding our businesses into international markets together. And I had gotten engaged to the daughter of my rival company's CEO. Brielle was a clear-headed and insightful woman. While we had feelings for each other, we primarily saw each other as partners, walking side by side. We were very satisfied with each other, which is why we decided to get engaged. And it was at my engagement party with Brielle that I saw Seraphina again. She sat among the guests, visibly pregnant, her face haggard, her entire demeanor wooden and somber. Brielle smiled playfully. I invited her specifically, just to let you rub it in. Himph. Today she'll learn just how blind she was. With that, Brielle took my hand and led me towards Seraphina. Seraphina stared intently at our intertwined hands, her eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. Ms. Ainsworth, I must thank you for your gracious refusal to marry him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to marry such a wonderful and outstanding man like Ethan. Here, I'll toast to you. May you have a son soon. Brielle finished speaking and drank her wine without waiting for Seraphina's reply. Brielle's words made Seraphina's face darken with displeasure. It was no secret that Seraphina had previously given birth to 2 daughters, and Julian had publicly berated her for being a hen that couldn't lay eggs. Brielle's toast to her having a son was a clear mockery. Seraphina glared at me, her eyes swirling with emotions I couldn't quite decipher. Miss Caldwell, you're too kind. I wish, Miss Caldwell, not to be like me, and to have a boy on her first try. Brielle chuckled softly. I'm not like Miss Ainsworth. After all, no matter what I give birth to, my husband will love it. Right, darling? Brielle's affectionate tone sent a shiver through my heart. I looked at her adoringly. That's right. Just then, Brielle's mother called her away. Before leaving, she leaned close to me and whispered, My assistance ends here. It's up to you to rub it in now. Don't thank me. I watched her retreating figure, feeling something loosen within my heart. Do you love her, Ethan? Seraphina stared at me intently, seeming nervous. You don't love her, do you? I heard it's just a business alliance. Ms. Ainsworth, I interrupted her rambling. You're being presumptuous. My relationship with my fiancé is none of your concern. I found the whole conversation pointless. She was just a stranger to me now. My joys and sorrows no longer revolved around her. With that, I turned to leave, not wanting to engage with her any further. No, you can't love her. Seraphina suddenly rushed forward and grabbed my hand tightly, her emotions running high. Ethan, you said you love me most. You can't love anyone else? Ethan, wait for me. After I give birth to this child and my illness is cured, can we be together again? I turned around and sneered. What makes you think I would want a woman who betrayed me? Besides, I find it disgusting. I pulled my hand away from Seraphina's grasp. Seraphina was humiliated, her face ashen. She roared at me, furious and embarrassed. I knew it. Ethan, you never loved me. Your claims of love were all lies. You deceived me. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't care that I betrayed you and had children with someone else. You just don't love me. So my choice was right. Julian is the one who loves me most. I was right. I scoffed. Think whatever you want. Whether she was right or wrong, what did it have to do with me? That day, Seraphina fled in disgrace. My life gradually became filled with Brielle's presence. We held our wedding a month after our engagement, and 20 days after the wedding, Brielle became pregnant. When Brielle and I received the pregnancy test results at the hospital, we stared at each other in stunned silence for a long time, and then we both burst into tears. Tears of joy. However, joy turned to sorrow. In our happiest moment, we encountered Julian and Seraphina. It was the day Seraphina was giving birth. I felt it was bad luck and wanted to leave, but Brielle was eager to watch the drama unfold. Seraphina finally gave birth to a boy. However, she lay on the hospital bed, screaming in terror. Why? Why didn't the mission succeed? Why was it declared a failure? I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I was stunned. From Seraphina's words, I gathered that her so-called system mission had failed. I believed her about the system, as absurd as it sounded. How else could you explain her surviving brain cancer for so long? It seemed that Seraphina's mission had failed. Impossible. I've already given birth to 3 children, and I even had a boy. Why did it still fail? What do you mean, a 1-month countdown to death? I don't believe it. It must be a mistake. I don't want to die. I can't die. Why did it fail? Tell me why. I had a pretty good idea why Seraphina's mission failed. Because she hadn't chosen the man who loved her most. I was certain that I had loved her back then, but she chose Julian. She chose wrong. Death was the price she paid for her wrong choice. What are you wailing about? Stop screaming. It's annoying. Julian's impatient voice was utterly cold. Seraphina's emotions became even more unhinged. She grabbed Julian's shoulders, her eyes bloodshot as she glared at him. Julian, tell me, do you love me or not? Love, love, love. Are you crazy? Asking me that all the time. Julian pushed Seraphina away, answering perfunctorily. But why? Why did the mission fail even though you love me? No, no. Julian, you lied to me. Seraphina shrieked, hysterically questioning Julian. You don't love me. The system said the one who loves me most is Ethan. You lied to me. You lied that you were the one who loved me most. So I abandoned Ethan and had children with you. Why did you lie to me? Why did you hurt me? Why don't you love me? Enough. Julian slapped Seraphina, knocking her back onto the bed. He looked at her with disdain. Love, love, love. All day long. Can't you look at yourself? You're ugly and fat. What's there to love about you? Seraphina stopped struggling and lay on the bed, crying. But if you don't love me, I'll die. I'll really die. Then go ahead and die. You're bad luck. Julian spat. To tell you the truth, I'm disgusted just looking at you. You're a fat, ugly pig. And so what if I lied to you? I was your first love, but you weren't mine. Of course, you're not the one I love most. If it weren't for your money, I wouldn't even bother with you. If you want to die, go ahead and die. When you're dead, I can marry Aurora. Aurora, probably Julian's first love. I looked at Seraphina, desperately arguing with Julian in the hospital room, filled with despair and helplessness, and I felt a strange sense of sorrow. Hey, Ethan, are you feeling sorry for her? Brielle pouted, slightly displeased. I smiled and coaxed her. Don't you know me better than that? Am I the type to go back to old flames? Feel sorry for her? What? Feel sorry for her cheating on me? Yes, Seraphina's fate was her own doing. I didn't regret the genuine love I had once felt for her. True love can be misplaced, but it will eventually find someone who cherishes it. I took Brielle's hand and turned to leave, without looking back. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Seraphina. Her voice was hoarse, filled with despair and tears. Ethan, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was wrong. I know now that you were the one who loved me most. Please save me. I don't want to die. I just need one child. One child is enough? I looked at Brielle's peaceful sleeping face and said coldly, Ms. Ainsworth, I don't love you anymore. So, I can't save you. And I won't love you in the future. Don't bother me again. My wife doesn't like you. It would upset her. I was a man who never looked back, and I would only love those who deserved my love. From then on, I let go of all my resentment and anger, focusing on my family and career. The next time I heard news of Seraphina, it was on the news. Seraphina had killed Julian and the woman named Aurora. She hadn't spared the 3 children either, setting a fire that killed them all. It was reported that after Seraphina gave birth to the boy, Julian took complete control of Pearl. He not only wanted a divorce, but also demanded that she leave with nothing. And Seraphina, knowing that her mission had failed and that she was about to die, went completely insane, deciding to take Julian down with her. No one survived the fire. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. I would focus on my career, my family, my wife. I would no longer toss and turn at night over a failed relationship. This was just a small lesson in my long life. And my life, because of this lesson, would become even smoother and brighter. Seraphina's epilogue. Julian wasn't my first love, but Ethan was a light in my life. Being able to walk alongside him was once my only dream. I longed to be someone worthy of him. That's why I refused to join Ethan's company and chose to start my own business. My entrepreneurial journey was smooth, and I was happy. I always believed that I had worked my way to Ethan's side through my own efforts. But I was wrong. Some people said I was Ethan's mistress, a kept woman, and that my achievements were all thanks to him. The first time I heard such things, I was uncomfortable, but I didn't take it to heart. My talent was obvious. But gradually, I realized it wasn't that simple. Everything I had seemed to be given to me by Ethan. Business partners were polite to me because of him. Industry leaders were willing to smile at me and speak to me because I was Ethan's girlfriend. My feelings were complex. I started to resist standing next to Ethan. I even began to doubt his love. Did he really not love me? If he loved me, how could he tolerate people saying such things about me? If he loved me, he wouldn't let me be subjected to gossip. Did he truly love me? I didn't know. All I knew was that I didn't want to be someone's kept woman anymore. When I found out I had cancer, I was devastated. Why? Why couldn't I be happy? Just when I thought I had no hope, a system contacted me. It said it was the blessed motherhood system. If I had a child with the man who loved me most, my illness would be cured. My first thought was Ethan, but I doubted. Did he love me? I wasn't sure, so I didn't dare gamble. Just then, Julian appeared. I remembered when we relied on each other, when he was the only one who stayed by my side during my darkest moments. I had hated him for leaking the videos, but he said he didn't do it on purpose. He knelt in the rain all night, apologizing and begging me not to leave him. I believed him. He loved me so much. He wouldn't have done it intentionally. After Julian appeared, I realized I had other options besides Ethan. Julian was willing to kneel for me, but Ethan never would. Was Julian more in love with me than Ethan? Yes, he must be. So, that night, I slept with Julian. I wanted to live. My choice was Julian. Only with Julian could I prove myself. I wasn't a kept woman, not a trophy. Only the person who could let me be myself was the one who loved me most. So, I ran away from the wedding. I ran away with Julian at my wedding with Ethan. At that time, I thought I couldn't be wrong. But after being with Julian, I gradually realized that I didn't feel Julian's love. He made me work and socialize while pregnant. He seemed to value money more than my life. Ethan would never do that. But I had no way back. I had to believe that Julian loved me. He said it himself. He was the one who loved me most. But why, after I gave birth to 2 children, did the system still not declare the mission a success? Why? Was it because they weren't boys? When I was pregnant with my 3rd child, I prayed that it would be a boy. He was my only hope for survival. And I wasn't disappointed. The prenatal checkup said it was a boy. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, I heard the news of Ethan's engagement. I actually felt pain. Seeing him with another woman, I was insanely jealous. I understood then. I loved Ethan. I wanted to be with him, even if he didn't love me the most. It didn't matter. As long as I gave birth to this child and the mission succeeded, I could return to Ethan's side. But he said he found me disgusting. See? He didn't love me after all. He just didn't love me. If he loved me, he wouldn't care that I betrayed him and had children with someone else. I wasn't wrong. Ethan would surely regret not agreeing to take me back. His relationship with that woman was just a business alliance, without any feelings. It didn't matter. After I gave birth and my illness was cured, I would pursue him just like when we first met. He must still have feelings for me. But why after I gave birth to a boy, did the mission fail? I couldn't believe it. If the mission failed, I would die. I didn't want to die. The system told me it was because the person I chose wasn't the one who loved me most. The system said the one who loved me most was Ethan, not Julian. How could that be? How could that be possible? But everything proved that I was wrong. Julian didn't love me. He was just after my wealth. I was blinded by my own delusions, misunderstanding Ethan, thinking he didn't love me. How ridiculous. Looking back, he had given me so much, his unconditional kindness. But what did I do? I betrayed him. I regretted it, but it was too late. He was already with someone else, and he no longer loved me. It was all Julian's fault. How could I let him get away with it? So, I set fire to him and myself. Ethan, when you hear the news of my death, will you cry for me? I'm sorry. I hope to meet you again in the next life. Next time, I won't misunderstand you.